telephone, should I say, we have the one and only Becky Jenner. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Aha, and how are you this morning?
Very well, thank you. I'm disappointed with the change in the weather, but apart from that, all's good.
Ah, of course. It's autumn, isn't it? That's the main thing.
Yes.
Right, so we're talking this morning about Rett Syndrome. Now, I have all my facts and figures. I have a very lovely girl called Paula who gives me all the facts and figures about Rett Syndrome. Now, to be quite honest, and I put my hands up here, Becky, I've actually never heard of Rett Syndrome before, so what's it all about?
Okay, well, you're certainly not alone with that, and obviously this is why the campaign's so important. Rett syndrome is a complex neurological disorder. It does affect mainly females, about 1 in 12,000 females, 1 in 40,000 males. And children are born with it, but it's the most difficult aspect of the whole disorder is that it's not immediately apparent. So you can carry the child, give birth to a child, and you'll do the normal things of counting fingers and toes and thinking, yeah, that's all good, we've got through that. And then around about a year, 18 months, then the disorder starts to show itself. So up until that point, the child can pass milestones in terms of the usual checkups that a baby would have. There might be some people who sort of think, oh yeah, it's a little bit slow maybe in some areas, but not enough to give major concern until they get to about that sort of year, 18 months. And then it becomes much more noticeable and the child can actually regress and lose skills that they previously acquired. So for instance, my daughter, who's now 21, she regressed actually at 11 months, which was really early, and it happened overnight. She screamed for 24 hours, was completely inconsolable, and woke up the next day and she couldn't get on all fours anymore. She couldn't finger feed, she couldn't pick a cup up, she couldn't say mum in the morning. And that was really obviously very, very distressing. And at that point, we didn't know what we were dealing with. So that's where the starting point of the disorder. It is genetic, but generally not hereditary. So you can have a child and then go on to have other children that will not be affected, and only in less than 1% of cases will there be more than one child in the family.
Now, of course, Rett Syndrome, it is Rett Syndrome Awareness Month in October. So what are you doing as an organisation or as an individual to actually broadcast the message?
Okay. Well, social media plays a huge part in getting messages out these days, and that's the main part of our campaign. So every day from the 1st of October, we've been releasing a new fact about Rett Syndrome on our Facebook and Twitter feeds. And we're building it into a story. So we sort of started, obviously, at the beginning with information about the fact that the disability is the second most common profound disability in females after Down syndrome, which is kind of what you were saying. You'd never heard of it, but in fact, although it's 1 in 12,000, it is the second most common profound disability. So we started with that, and then we're sort of telling the story each day and building on that, and we're sort of up to day 5 now. And the post today is a particularly tricky one. It's around grief and loss, because at that point of diagnosis, when you think you've had that child, which has developed normally to a large extent, you're then told actually the child you had has Rett syndrome, and this is the complexity of the disability, because in most cases it's a profound and severe disability. At that point, your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations for that child completely fly out the window, and although your child may still look pretty normal, everything changes at that point. Family life changes completely at that point, and it will never be the same again. And you have to adjust to the new norm for your family, and make new dreams and new hopes for your child, but obviously completely different to what they were before.
Yeah, and of course it is very life-changing for families, isn't it?
Hugely. The impact is felt by everybody, obviously not just the parents who then suddenly become carers, but also for any siblings in the family. It changes dynamics in the family, and the child, increasingly with time, that disabled child needs more and more support as they go through childhood and into adolescence and adulthood. And so much of the focus then becomes on that child. It's detrimental to family relationships unless they get in proper support, which is kind of where Rett UK comes in, really, is help to actually support the family, particularly at those real crisis times around diagnosis and regression and things like transition. Those are the real stress points. It's a life with Rett syndrome is a real roller coaster with lots of dips and very steep climbs up to get any sort of high and an improvement, just one step forward. So family support that we provide is really crucial in helping those families just get through every day, really.
Now, you talk about support, of course, and support information is very important about this Rett syndrome. What type of support is there out there that people can actually get to actually try and cope with the everyday today sort of living that goes on with this symptoms?
Yeah. Well, Rett UK is actually the only UK charity that's providing professional family support, and we've been doing that now for 30 years. It's our 30th anniversary this year. So as an organisation, we've got a huge amount of wealth of information that comes from the original families that were involved in starting the charity, whose girls and women and some boys are now obviously into adulthood and have lived with the syndrome. So we learn from that. We've developed some very key relationships with people within the NHS who are now experts in Rett syndrome, and they help us providing specialist clinics to the families. So what families struggle with a lot is actually access to local information and support from people who, as you say, have heard of the syndrome. It's so rare. So often your GP or your local paediatrician, they might not even have heard of it, and you need to access to specialist people, so we can provide that. We also have a huge range of resources on our website, but also written resources. We have a family companion we launched last year, which is like an A to Z, if you like, in a Filofax style compendium of everything that you could think of about Rett syndrome, which we're constantly updating as well as things change. And very importantly, we have our national telephone helpline, which is open Monday to Fridays. We're only closed over Christmas, but even then there's an out-of-hours number. So families we're never more than a phone call away. They can pick up the phone, talk to one of our family support team, who are very knowledgeable about Rett syndrome and understand what the family is going through. We can signpost to other services if we need to, and we also provide a quarterly newsletter, and we have regional events around the UK where families can come and meet professionals and listen to presentations from their area of their special expertise. Obviously meeting other families too at those events, which is really important, because one of the things that you do feel when you do get that diagnosis is very isolated. You think, why me? And who else can I talk to? No one else will really understand what I'm going through. So linking families is really important, and having that opportunity to talk to someone who knows exactly what you're going through is key.
Of course.
Those are the kind of things that we provide.
Yeah, of course, that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about sharing the experiences with other people, whether it be through social media or going to meetings. And that's what's it all about. It's all about the information that you can get from families, from individuals who have people who have Rett syndrome. And it's about talking, isn't it?
It is so much about talking and learning from other people, so other people will have experienced what you've experienced, and they can give you some tips, strategies how to cope with that, and also reassure you that actually it doesn't go on forever. There are lots of different phases within Rett syndrome. Things change all the time, and whilst you might seem in the grip of one particular problem, it does move on. I'm not saying you won't be presented with a different problem, but it doesn't last forever generally, and you can go on. There are other things that will come up, but parents will be able to support each other through that. So yes, talking is really, really important, and that access to information, that can be life-changing. We've got several families where their girls have been in really difficult situations and intensive care in hospital, and the hospital really don't know what they're dealing with because it is so rare. And we then can often advocate for the family, speak to the people in hospital and say, look, have you checked X, Y, Z? It could be this. Don't just dismiss it because it's Rett syndrome. And sadly, we do hear that. We hear families coming back to us and saying they're not doing any more. They're just saying, well, what do you expect? It's Rett syndrome. And that's terribly sad, and it's wrong, because someone with Rett syndrome can have cancer, someone with Rett syndrome can have a bowel problem, like the rest of the population. And it's too easy for the professional to overlook those things sometimes and just say, well, it is Rett syndrome, what else do you expect? So we've got a couple of cases, say, where we've had to be really strong about advocating, saying you need to look for other things as well, and you need to push beyond what you would normally do and get that support and get the right care for their families and for that person.
So, of course, you're telling me as well that even GPs don't actually recognise the syndrome itself.
No, again, it's, and not for lack of want, but it's just the fact that it's unlikely that they might have one in their whole career, come across one person with Rett syndrome because of its rarity, and also because of the fact it's not showing itself from birth. It's not immediately apparent, and there's not a physical appearance from birth as such. These things only come out later. So it is really important that we are raising awareness, not just with the public, but also with the healthcare profession too, and making sure that information is accessible to them. So the website and social media and things like that are really important these days in reaching people.
I say it's all about information. Now, just looking at my notes, apparently there isn't a cure for Rett syndrome, but treatment for the disorder is symptomatic, focusing on the management of symptoms.
Yes, yeah. There isn't a cure. There is hope, though. In 2007, a major piece of research done by Sir Adrian Bird, who's working out of Edinburgh University, was able to actually show that Rett syndrome was reversible in laboratory mice, which has caused obviously huge excitement and hope within the community. Obviously, mice are very different to humans, and that was 2007, 9 years on. We've learned a whole lot more. And there are certainly now on the horizon some potential drugs that will treat certain areas of Rett syndrome, whether that's problems with the breathing or whether that's more targeting on particular epilepsy problems and that kind of thing. There is more hope. What a cure will actually look like for someone who's lived with Rett syndrome and they're in their 30s and 40s now is very questionable. But what we are hopeful about is that actually there will be some specific drugs that will help certain aspects. So as you said at the beginning, actually at the moment it's about actually managing the symptoms and giving the people the best possible care. So again, it's about access to physios who are familiar with Rett syndrome, the type of problems that can develop with age, the type of problems that develop with eating and feeding, so specialists. Speech and language therapists are key people as well because they can have a lot of feeding difficulties which then can impact on other areas of their life. So again, it's about having that access to information and access to people who have that knowledge. Now,
just looking at my notes, apparently Rett syndrome is estimated to affect 1 in every 10 to 15,000 live female births. Prenatal testing is available for families. Is that an important thing to do?
You wouldn't if it was your first child and you don't, or not even necessarily your first child. If you don't have a child in the family with Rett syndrome, there's no reason why you would go out and seek to have a test done for it because, well, the likelihood you never would have heard of it anyway, but it's not something you would go out and test in the way that they do for Down syndrome these days. In order to actually ascertain whether a fetus actually has Rett syndrome, you would need to go in and take blood sample from the actual fetus, which in itself is a risky procedure. So you would have to have very good reason to want to go and do that. The way the genetics works with Rett syndrome is that a mother generally or a father does not actually carry a 40 gene. In 99% of cases, they do not carry a 40 gene, and the mutation itself is a de novo or a new mutation that occurs just in that child, and no one else in the family is then likely to be affected. In that tiny percentage, so less than 1% of cases, a parent, normally the mum, can actually carry a 40 gene but be so mildly affected she wouldn't even be aware of it, and then she can pass it on to her children, and she could have more than one child with Rett syndrome, but that is, say, in less than 1% of cases.
Yeah. Now, some children apparently they require special equipment and aids such as braces to arrest sclerosis, splints to modify hand movements. What other sort of aids are there available?
Okay, I think it varies. There is a big spectrum in terms of levels of the severity of the syndrome. There are some people who do achieve independent mobility, but the large number are actually wheelchair users, or at least have certainly some impairment with their mobility. So specialist equipment to help with standing as well, so standing frames. You mentioned bracing for scoliosis, which is where you can get a curve in the spine. Hand splinting. So one of the typical traits of girls and boys with Rett syndrome is that they would do repetitive hand movements. So that can be like hand wringing, hand washing, tapping. And that interferes with purposeful hand function. So sometimes it helps to stabilise one or both of the hands with a splint so they can actually do something useful, because it's like breaking a circuit. It's very hard for them to actually overcome those stereotypical hand movements. So that type of equipment helps with that. And more recently, we've seen a huge leap forward in communication equipment for the girls, and this is through something called eye gaze, which is basically where the eyes are used to actually are tracked by a computer, and the girls can actually use it on a laptop and actually be able to, at a very basic level, play games using their eyes. But as they obviously get more skilled with it and more sophisticated, then they can actually move on to things like actually spelling words out, making sentences, and use it as a very purposeful, meaningful ways of communicating. And there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm around that, and that really is opening up a whole new world for people with Rett syndrome, because for a long time it's been very difficult to actually truly assess how intellectually competent they are. But what we're actually learning now, and parents have always said this, is actually the girls do understand so much more than would be at first apparent, because they generally haven't got any speech. But the eye gaze is really showing people now, actually these girls have a very high level of competence, and you should always assume competence in them until shown otherwise. But they're bright cookies, and they need to be given the opportunity to actually express and communicate in the same way that other people can, who can obviously verbalise what they want to say.
And of course, the fact is that even though people who have Rett syndrome, with the proper support care network available, they can lead fulfilling lives.
Absolutely, yeah. And it is about the support and the information. It's about keeping them well, so access to good quality health care, having regular checkups of things, knowing what to look out for. So particularly, at the point you get a diagnosis, then the information you should be given then is particular problems that can develop, like scoliosis, a curved spine, and how you can actually help minimise that. So there are particular exercises you can do, for instance, in a swimming pool, keeping them weight-bearing into standing frames if they're not doing that. All those kind of things help. So the earlier you can put those interventions in, the better the longer-term outcomes. But yes, people with Rett syndrome are very sociable, they're very smiley and very happy in lots of occasions, despite all their difficulties. And that they are very engaging, good fun to be around. A lot of them have a very wicked sense of humour. The naughtier it is, the better. That seems to be a common trait. And the girls particularly are terrible flirts as well.
Now, with it being the Rett Syndrome Awareness Month in October, do you find you get more busy in this month?
We are not more busy from our families. What we're busy with as an office team is actually obviously promoting that and pushing the campaign. Plus also next weekend we've got a big family conference in Northampton, and we have over 90 families attending a 3-day event with presenters and things. So we're very busy with that at the moment. But for the families, in terms of October and awareness raising, it really is about asking them to help us get the message out there, for using their Facebook and their Twitter feeds to share the posts that we're putting out.
Of course, it's all down to social media. It's such a powerful tool. Now,
It's powerful.
Of course. Now, the thing is, we'll put all this information onto our website, www.ignitionradio.co.uk. And, of course, the website again, Becky?
For us, it's www.rettuk.org.
Right. And, of course, telephone numbers?
01582 798 910.
Lovely. And of course, we'll put all that information onto our website for our listeners to have a look at. Again, thank you ever so much for coming on to Ignition Radio this morning and taking time out to talk about what is a very important subject. And of course, I think, because as I said to you before, I didn't know anything about this, and this has really opened my eyes up. And of course, I hope that you have a busy month, and of course, with all the events coming up as well. And of course, spreading the word about Rett Syndrome awareness.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Becky, take care.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. That's, of course, Becky Jenner. She is promoting Rett Syndrome Awareness Month. And, of course, you can find out all the information on our website, www.ignitionradio.co.uk.